This podcast is funded by Ted Dintersmith, the executive producer of the acclaimed film Most Likely to Succeed, and the author of the best-selling book What School Could Be.
Hey everyone, welcome to the What School Could Be podcast. I'm your host for today, Emma George, for this special 150th Talk Story episode with none other than your usual host, Josh Reppun, my beloved father, friend, and co-conspirator. Before we start the show, please check out all the resources at whatschoolcouldbe.org and our global online community. If you are a committed education change agent ready to roll up your sleeves and reimagine teaching and learning, simply install the What School Could Be app on your mobile device or navigate to community.whatschoolcouldbe.org. We hope to see you there. And without further ado, in lieu of a formal intro, an ode to my dad. Youngest of 7, completing the family at 9, Joshua Engel Reppun, son of Jean Engel Reppun, grandson of Eliza Jane Stewart. Born and raised on the windward side of Oahu in Kahalu, Kaneohe Bay his first and forever playground. The true classroom he came home to each day when the school day was done. To build rock walls and chicken coops and gardens, to fish and body surf and explore. Cradled by the Ko'olau Mountains, nurtured and grown by the sea, makahana ka'ike, through doing one learns. His mantra. His father, my grandfather, a long-time and often celebrated family physician and patriarch. His mother, my grandmother, professor of biology, community activist, devoted wife, beloved companion to each of her children, and naturally, much more. 2 people dedicated to service, integrity, and commitment. 7 offspring who took up their cause. The youngest, my father. A winding and scenic journey from Kahalu to the mainland and back again. Through storms and unexpected twists and turns, he remained, committed to cracking the code on life. Like the phoenix, he rose again and again, and along the way, blessings on blessings on blessings bestowed. Seeds planted, waiting to grow. The flowers now in full bloom, all these years later. A true marvel and model for what is possible when you dare to hope, dare to soften, dare to keep going. A connector and builder of community, champion of students and kiddos everywhere. Playful, excitable, humble, and always seeking ways to give back. Always uplifting, always encouraging. A man committed to life and all those whose paths he crosses. Avid swimmer, musubi-loving father, beloved Papa Honu. Miles and miles and miles we've walked in each other's shoes. And now, I witness you in full bloom. Youngest of 7, born and raised on the land, anchored and supported by our clan, for better or worse, come storm and wind, a thriving legacy built with your hands. Makahana ka'ike, through doing, one learns. And now, here's my conversation with your What School Could Be host, my dad, Josh Reppun. Hey everyone, welcome to the What School Could Be podcast. I'm your host for today, Emma George, for this special 150th Talk Story episode with none other than your usual host, Josh Reppun, my beloved father, friend, and co-conspirator. Pop, welcome to the show.
Oh, good morning, my lovely daughter. You cannot imagine how much I've been looking forward to this. It's really great to be with you today.
Oh, me too, Pop. I want to start us off today with a moment of grounding and acknowledgement inspired by your 91st guest on this show, Parul Punjabi Jagdish, who so beautifully reminded us of the power of pausing to invoke what he named as, quote, the intelligence of all the many people who have lived on this land, all the people that have nurtured this land, looked after the airways, the waterways. And so we pay our respects, immense respects, to all the elders of all Indigenous peoples around the world, all First Nations peoples. And if we go way far back into the history of all life, we'll see that we are essentially paying respects to everyone's ancestors everywhere. And so here I am, dialing in currently from Marin County, land inhabited and stewarded by the Coast Miwok people for thousands of years before my ancestors arrived, who are still here today. And acknowledging that you, my dear Papahonu, are undoubtedly listening to the early morning birdsong in your Leeward Valley home on Oahu, the ancestral land of the Indigenous Hawaiians who voyaged across the sea and who are very much still there today. And I also want to acknowledge before we begin that you and I are here trying something new, walking the walk, practicing what we preach. I have never hosted a podcast episode before, and you have never been the guest on your own show.
This is true.
It delights me to no end because in a classic waypoint on our collective journey, you and me, to find out what life is about by living into what we believe, here we are. And by giving ourselves the grace to be learners, taking risks, creating and inhabiting brave spaces, and leading by example in our willingness to fail. I highly doubt this conversation will feel like a failure. But in the spirit of our shared educator hearts, I thought I would name that to give our listeners a window into the process and intention of this episode. And with that, let's dive in, shall we?
We shall.
All right, Pop. In a recent episode with Jennifer On of Lead by Learning, there was a moment about midway through where you said, and I quote, "All of a sudden, I want to go back to school and I want to go back to teaching." Inspired by you, my brilliant, thoughtful, and incredibly thorough podcast hosting dad, let's start with a two-part hypothetical based on that moment to give our listeners a sense of who you really are at your core as a person who has devoted your life to what school could be. Sound good?
That sounds fantastic. Awesome.
All right. Sit back, take it in. Part one. Imagine, if you will, that tomorrow you wake up to find that there has been a mass movement of all folks who have left teaching to work in adjacent spaces, and the directive is to return to the classroom. Your what school could be email no longer works. Your list of tasks in Google is gone. Your logins are all junk. Life is once again a blank canvas. But as you well know, things have significantly changed in the last decade since you were a teacher. And you, of all people, are viscerally aware of what the role of a, quote, teacher ought to look and sound and feel like in practice. You also now have a massive encyclopedia in your brain of all the schools, educators, and administrators that inspire and inform your emergent understanding of the best possible learning environment for kids. Taking those things into consideration, and in as much focused detail as you can provide, please describe for us where you would be headed, what role you would take up, and how you would show up in this unprecedented moment. And as an aside, let's refrain from naming existing programs, schools, people, etc., so we can clearly listen for the voice that resides within you about how you would orient to this opportunity to return to your previous career, given all that has transpired since you left.
Wow. Okay. So I definitely want to honor, Emma, your directive to not name any particular schools or programs or things like that. But I do want to acknowledge something here because you brought it up early on about the quote that came from the Jennifer On episode. And for our listeners, that episode happened because of a reading that I did of a book called Street Data. And it was actually chapter 7 of Street Data that led me to that Jennifer On episode. And so my dive back into the classroom, so to speak, as an educator with everything that I've gained over the last 10 years really starts with a prime directive, which is to meet the young people where they're at, assuming that they're all young people. I was an older college student, so I'm a little bit sensitive to the idea of, young people. But meeting the young people where they're at and really digging into what that means. And for me, what that means is that you have to in the beginning, and really you have to continue it, you have to take time to get to know the learners who are in front of you. And I look back on certain parts of my teaching career with some regret because I just dove right into the content. I dove right into the curriculum. I dove into, the North Star of the standards that I needed to meet and the tests that the kids had to pass, hopefully. And I didn't take the time that was necessary to get to know them, at least in the beginning of my career. But if I were to do it today, wow, those kids would have my full attention. And I would take the time, inspired by one of my good friends, Mitch Weathers, a shout out to him right here in this moment. I would take the time to really get to know the kids. So really, if you are committed to that, then the question becomes how? How do you do that? How do you balance the requirements of education and the time that's necessary to get to know the kids? And I realized that as I look back on my career, in the second phase, which was when I was teaching at La Pietra Hawaii School for Girls, I think without having read any books about it or knowing any of the jargon around it, I was instinctively starting to do that with my young learners. And today, if I were going back into it again, that would be the process, would be you just take the time, you figure out what the activities are that you need to put together. You maybe even, well, not maybe even, very definitely, you would co-create those activities with your young learners. And the whole object would be to get to know each other. And in getting to know each other, that's when you start to build relationships. And since Emma, you named the moment through the calling out of the indigenous peoples around the world and the spaces that we occupy, in Hawaii, that phrase is pilina. It means to build relationships. It's the process of building relationships. So that would be the most important thing that I would do if I went back. And I think what would happen is that, once you start building relationships and now you have a two-way street happening in your classroom, whether your classroom is inside or outside, wherever it happens to be, now you've got a two-way street happening, and then the magic begins. That's when the magic begins, is when you really, really get to know your students. Even if you've got, 25, 30 of them in your class, whatever it takes to get to know them, that's really what needs to be done, and that's what I would do.
Beautiful. And the second part of this hypothetical, sitting with that answer of yours, that instinct to build relationship, to meet learners where they're at, to be with them on the journey, and to do whatever you can, I offer you a second imagining on this morning. So setting aside that first vision of what could be, need to imagine now that instead of waking up to find that you will be returning to the classroom, you awake to discover that there is a national invitation for all grown-ups to receive a paid day during the week to explore, experiment, and ideate.
Oh my. Bring it on.
In nationwide project-based learning centers, local learning centers. Spaces that are as dynamic and resourced as you can possibly imagine. Think both indoor and outdoor space, outfitted with all the tools you might need, access to all kinds of information, and collaboration with local experts, elders, children, etc. The call is for adults of this country to be immersed in regular, joyful, and purposeful activity of their choosing, surrounded by other people doing the same thing, with abundant opportunities to collaborate, build connection, and solve problems. A tangible and routine revillaging effort that will ripple out into the family unit, wider community, and the world as a whole. Taking that all in, what do your innate instincts draw you to study, explore, and experiment with here in your life now? What would be your first couple of passion projects that you would immediately begin working on? Mind you, in this hypothetical, we'll say that we know that adults taking this time will ultimately create major positive change globally. With that as a given, with the intention of relieving you from the burden of needing to create the change you wish to see with your projects, tell us about what your heart longs to create without the need to measure it against the metric of change.
Wow. What a beautiful invitation. I think what I would do with this day is to begin to make my good ancestor contribution to the rebuilding of the civic culture of this nation, of the United States of America. And the way that I would go about doing that is, and this is sort of part and parcel of something that I've been working on recently. There was a while, I think you remember, Emma, a while back where I was just like, it was all work, work, work. And I was trying to figure out how to carve out some time to read. And then I developed something called Reading Fridays. So it was like, okay, block off Friday mornings. And, my wife, Cheryl, and I are part of this funky club here in Hawaii, the Elks Club. And it's just super funky place. And I would go down to the Elks Club on Friday mornings and I would read and drink coffee. And that felt like such a luxury. And it actually worked for about a year. I got a lot of things read, a lot of books that I wanted to read. So the variation on that, the passion project that I would want to do that might begin to help rebuild a civic culture in this country and here in my home state of Hawaii is to recreate that idea, but to do it with a group of people and do it together as a, book club sounds a little bit cliche. Let's call it a civic rebuilding project. And that we would come together and agree to find some really, really cool space in nature, probably near the ocean, because you know me, right? I live and breathe on the edge of the ocean, and every single morning I swim in the ocean, and that's where I do my thinking. That it would be a very special space with some very specially comfortable chairs, reading chairs that are portable, and that we would put together a list of books that we would want to read together. So I'm imagining, this is super fun, by the way. This is like my imagination is going wild. So just thinking about like if I could get 10 of my friends to carve out that one day with me, and we're going to build a civic rebuilding project, and we're going to get together in these comfy chairs, and everybody brings the beverage of their choice. For me, it's going to be coffee. And then we won't just discuss what we've already read, we'll actually read for part of that time. So it's almost like a silent meditation, and everybody reads at a different speed, so that's fine. And we would dive in and we would read, and then we would talk about what we've read, and we would do it through the frame of how do you rebuild civic culture. And I think going back to the first hypothetical, it actually involves building pilina, building relationships with people. So maybe these are people that I know already. Maybe there are people that would be invited in that I don't know. Maybe even that's the better scenario, is to have folks who I don't know. And then part of that process of rebuilding civic culture is actually getting to know people, but you do it through a reading frame. So there's a kind of intellectual action that takes place that is going to become emotional, and it's going to become literal and figurative, and the environment that you're in and is the natural environment that you're in is going to start to impact how the conversation goes. And step by step, every single week, this would be the beginning of a culture of compassion and kindness and critical inquiry and all of those things that we're talking about at What School Could Be that are really important to the long-term viability of our culture, which is feeling really kind of broken at this point. And so this would be a good ancestor project. It would be a civic project. It would be a reading project. It would be a project in the natural environment. And then as I sort of close my thoughts about this, I'm thinking, gosh darn it, I need to do this. Oh, that's a great hypothetical. And really it feels like the two are kind of connected together. Because what would I do if I went back to teaching tomorrow, which is a mildly terrifying thought, but in really getting to know the kids and meeting them where they're at, you're rebuilding a civic culture again. And I think that would be what I would wish for all teachers everywhere, whether you're required to teach a subject or whether you actually have something that's open or elective or something that's project-based, whatever it happens to be, that all teachers everywhere are thinking of themselves as part of a great civic building project. And the North Star on that would be planet Earth in a much better place.
Wow, I have to say, I just love this because I have witnessed you over my entire life, and I've had the privilege of watching you do exactly what you just described would be your current passion project. You've already done it so many times with so
Mm,
many students in your classroom, creating relationship, inviting folks in to creating civic culture. I want to laugh and say you can take the history teacher out of the classroom, but you can't take the history teacher out of the teacher. It's not perfect.
right. Can I make a quick shout out here because you've really inspired me? I want to do a quick shout out to Superintendent Jason Van Hukelum in Winchester, Virginia, who's kind of the protagonist of a new film that What School Could Be has coming out titled Multiple Choice. He, in the beginning of that episode, as you know, talks about his mother calling him a Tom Sawyer. And Tom Sawyer was one of my favorite books as a kid. Oh my God, I love that. I love that book. And I love Mark Twain. And so now I'm thinking, Jason, if you're listening, you've inspired me to think about this civic rebuilding project as a Tom Sawyer project. It's like you can't paint the fence alone. You got to go get your friends to paint the fence with you. And in that process, you're coming together as a community of people and you're building relationships and you're stretching your thinking. And so it's really cool to think back since you're interviewing me here today for the 150th, to think back about how much I've learned, Emma, over these 5 years that I've been doing this podcast. It gives me goosebumps here in the dark in Hawaii before daylight. And you're right, the birds are chirping. And I'm just thinking, wow, how blessed I am to have done all this learning. So to Jason and to Jennifer and all you people out there who've been so graciously my guests, thank you for helping me learn.
Beautiful. And I'm going to take a leaf out of my favorite podcaster's book here and say, that's a perfect segue into my next question. In your episode with Steve Shapiro and Nancy Rapport of Our Family Culture, they shared about the mission of their organization to support families in getting crystal clear on their shared core values and what it means to carry the family name in this world. As an example, and in a classic moment of jinx, they said, the Shapiros, we bounce back.
Yeah.
So building on your comment about Tom Sawyer, you as a kid leaning in that direction, and looking at family culture in the big picture, I think we can agree that all families have their share of hardship, struggle, and inherited suffering, some more than others. I think we can also agree that it is what we make of those more challenging aspects of our family dynamics that ultimately determines the outcome of our lives. To that end, you and I recently had the opportunity to reflect on the concept of the most generous interpretation, a term coined by Dr. Becky from her body of work with families and children as a world-renowned psychologist. So, Pop, looking through the lens of your MGI, or most generous interpretation, what would you say it meant to be a Reppun when you were growing up? And in what ways have you held on to any of those core values? And in what ways have you deviated to create your own?
Wow. What a beautiful question. So this actually, Emma, gives me an opportunity to reflect for a moment about the fact that a couple of months ago, I lost my second oldest brother, Tommy. And there are 6 boys in the family. Tommy is the second oldest brother, and my sister, of course, Martha, is the oldest. She's 13 years older than me. And I had the opportunity and the privilege to attend his memorial service at Punahou School, where we all went to school, which is a large independent school here in Honolulu. And that was just a couple of weekends ago. And that moment, that memorial moment, was co-constructed by Tommy's 3 sons, Alika, Will, and Eric, and their kids. And so it was Tommy's kids and his grandkids, and they designed what I think is one of the most beautiful memorials that I've ever attended. It was part tears and part dancing and part laughter and part song. And it was part joy and just intense sadness that he had been taken away from us in his 75th year. And I bring all this up because there is a photo, which I actually ended up posting on Facebook, and it got some attention because of how many people knew Tommy and appreciated him. He was a pathologist who diagnosed a lot of diseases that people had, and he worked his tail off for his entire medical career to try to help people survive illness. And he was just a really great person. And there's this photo of the remaining siblings with me on the right and my sister Martha on the left, sitting in the front row of this chapel. And, just as a funny kind of paint a picture aside, you could never have gotten 6 hobbits more beautifully lined up in a row in this photo. And they really do. I mean, we're I'm 66, my sister is 13 years older, and there's everything in between. And when you look at this photo with these gray hairs and these beards and legs and toes that are stained with, 50 years of growing kalo in the Lo'i in Waihole Valley on the windward side of Oahu, and everything that all of these wonderful people who I call my sister and my brothers have accomplished over the years, I think without reservation that I can say that when we talk about the Reppuns, we talk about committed. It is the word committed. And that's my takeaway. And I think maybe you see it now that you've joined the Wet'suwet'en team as of last January. And you obviously have the Reppun blood running strong in your veins. And that idea of being committed to something, when you commit, you commit. And when we say, oh, that's the Reppuns, it's like, I think that people from the outside would say, whatever it is that they take on, whether it's water rights or land rights or, protecting Kaneohe Bay from jet skis, or passions about education for me, or, my sister just like taking care of the earth through the testing, water testing work that she's done, all of that, you put it all together, it's just like they are committed. That's the Reppuns. And they don't quit. They just keep going. If they believe in what they're doing, they don't quit. They are committed. And I guess I would close by noting, for Cheryl and I know this is true for you too, Em, that one of our favorite shows right now is Ted Lasso. And almost in every episode, there's that moment where everybody files out of the locker room and they all tap the believe sign up on the door that's yellow. And I just love that idea that the Reppuns believe in certain things more or less, probably more. They believe in what I think are the right things about planet Earth and about people and justice and kindness and compassion and what's good for our culture. I'm not saying that we know better. I'm just saying that we think deeply about these things that make community actually work, and we are committed to them. And so shout out to Steve and Nancy, because their commitment is to family. I think the Reppun's commitment is, because there's so many of us, is more wide and varied, but nevertheless, it is a commitment. It is a full commitment. And that makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm carrying on the legacy of my brothers and my sister and my father and my mother and everybody else in the Reppun family by being as committed to, the tagline, Em, that has your photo on it in my Facebook page for Most Likely to Succeed is 100% by yesterday, that I want 100% of kids by yesterday to have opportunities to feel what it's like to really be engaged in learning. I'm committed to that idea, and I will not rest until we've gained ground on that. I will not rest.
Wow, it's such a privilege to sit here. I have my eyes closed, my heart is pounding, my Reppun heart pounding, listening to you, find words for what that is about this family, this group of hobbits, this group of humans who walk this earth. And I feel so proud to be a Reppun, genuinely.
Mm.
And to have the moment here now to reflect with you, my beloved father, on this family that we're a part of. And to hold the most generous interpretation, to be able to speak to it, to be able to acknowledge what's challenging and still be able to speak to our most generous interpretation together. And yeah, just to honor that here in this moment, there's nothing else I'm thinking on the back burner. I'm 100% with what you're saying, feeling what you're saying, agreeing with what you're saying. And I think there's something powerful about that.
If it's okay, I'd just like to add one more thought to this, which is since we're celebrating 150 episodes, wow, when I look back on all of those people, I think the way that I've been framing this podcast is I interview imaginative, creative, innovative educators and education leaders. I've said that 1,000 times.
Indeed.
But now, as I'm looking at it through the frame of the question that you asked, is that every one of those people is committed. They are committed to their work. And happily, it's innovative, creative, and imaginative work. But I'm just kind of blown away in the moment at how committed they are and what that means. Like that collective commitment is just like steel. It's like, it's the strongest material that you could possibly think of. And so massive shout out to everyone who's ever been a guest on this show, that your commitment to what you do, hand over my heart here in the best audio sense, hand over my heart. Thank you for all that you do.
So before we go to our first break, I want to ask you one more question. Staying with the theme of family, core values, and inherited versus self-generated ways of being in the world, I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to the topic of disposition, a recurring line of inquiry in several of your latest episodes. So, returning to your conversation with Prabal Jagdish, who inspired our intro, you asked him a beautifully crafted question about how he came into this world and how he walks through it now. In response, you shared a bit about how you think you came in on the sunny side, but ultimately were deeply influenced by your father, my grandfather, who held a fairly negative worldview and perspective on humans. That being said, you noted that over the last 10 years, you have found ways to cultivate an innate, sunny disposition, and commented that you like the idea that dispositions are not fixed, that they are something that can be nurtured and nourished over the course of a life. I'll add here that I have a treasured handmade keepsake onto which I once wood burned the phrase, quote, sunny on the inside. And in so many ways, I see how you and I have both been called in our lives to investigate and take on what it means to truly choose how we will walk through this life. It is my great honor to have this in common with you. And so I would love to hear more about what that self-discovery has entailed for you, how you found your way to the sunny side of the street, and how you managed to remain there despite the myriad reasons to despair in times I am sure would have validated my grandfather's perspective that man is no damn good.
And by way of context, that sign, man is no damn good, was over his office door. So it wasn't like a little something tucked away. It was sort of like the believe sign in reverse. If you tap that on the way in, you were tapping the ethos of man is no damn good. And Dad, for all of the compassion of his work as a doctor over 60 years here in Hawaii, on Lanai, on Molokai, on Oahu, he did incredible work as a country doctor, but he did have a very kind of negative man is no damn good view of the world. And I struggled with that for a good part of my life. And so, if the question is asking about, like, how did I emerge onto the sunny side of the street, and how do I keep myself on the sunny side of the street, which is a beautiful question, it actually is grounded in an assumption that you actually can live on one side of the street or the other. And I truly believe that. And I acknowledge, Emma, I totally acknowledge that people live in horrific circumstances all around the world. I speak from a position of privilege here on Oahu and Hawaii, most certainly. And I understand and try to empathize as much as possible with those whose circumstances would prevent them from being on the sunny side of the street. But philosophically speaking, I do believe that no matter what your circumstances are, and by the way, I was heavily influenced by a really important book that I read about 20 years ago, which is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. That book was huge for me. In the midst of the concentration camps, he made a case for not living on the sunny side of the street necessarily, but for having hope. And I think where I'm going with this is that the sunny side of the street is the hopeful side of the street. And despite anything that might be going on in the world, and what is going on in the world and the country right now is not unique. We've been through these cycles before in this country, and we've been through it around the world over and over and over again. But ultimately, the decision to be on the sunny side of the street is to have hope. And for me, as you know, and I've said this 1,000 times, it all began when I saw Most Likely to Succeed back in October of 2015. That film gave me such hope. Produced by Ted Dintersmith, directed by the brilliant Greg Whiteley. That film just gave me a vision for what school could be. And at the time, when I was teaching at La Pietra Hawaii School for Girls, I was already instinctually moving in that direction. And I feel, Emma, like, no joke, I feel like just imagine I have a rope in my hand and I'm pulling myself up out of the water, up onto a plateau of some sort, a rock outcropping. I'm pulling myself up, and the water is standardized education where most of the kids are just bored out of their minds. And it's just so terrible. And I was pulling myself up out of that teaching, and I was climbing up onto this rock plateau. And at the top of that rock plateau was High Tech High and Most Likely to Succeed. It gave me such a vision. So ever since then, over the past almost 11 years now, I have been walking along that side of the street. I've been walking along that path that has hope that High Tech High and the 1,000 million examples of it and variations on it around the country and around the world ultimately are going to win out, and that we will, in fact, reach that 100% by yesterday, that every kid will have an opportunity to do what we in Hawaii call makahana ka'ike. Makahana ka'ike, meaning in doing one learns. And that's the hopeful side of the street. And it's purposeful. It's not just something sort of like, incidental or something like that. I live it every single day. And what's really joyful right now, and I'll close with this thought, is and a shout out to my OG of OG partners, Mel Ching at What School Could Be. She and I have been on an incredible journey lately where we're moving across the country virtually and meeting with schools and with school leaders and with teachers. And it feels like, we're lifting up a rock and finding a gemstone under each rock. Every single time we meet with somebody, with Bill Summers in Canyon City in Colorado, or Andy Hoke and his school in Oregon, or schools in Michigan, or schools in New York, Kevin Ryan and his staff in Alden High School, New York. Everywhere we go, there are reasons for hope, because these are those same committed people, and they are committed to student engagement, and student engagement is everything. And that's what gives me hope. So it's circular in a way. Does that make sense? It's like it's very circular. The more hope you eat, the more you like eating the hope. It's like, occasionally I will indulge in Frosted Flakes. I know it's terrible, but every time you have a bowl of Frosted Flakes, you're like, someday I'm going to come back and have those Frosted Flakes again. For me, it happens all day long. Every single one of these meetings is a bowl of Frosted Flakes or a giant bowl of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, and every one of them just fills me with hope. And hope is fuel. Hope is the fuel that's in my tank, and it just keeps pushing me forward. So therefore, I walk on the sunny side of the street. And Dad, if you're looking down on this thing, God bless you, Dad. You are a beautifully compassionate and kind doctor, but I'm living my life a little bit differently, and I'm going to keep walking that sunny side of the street.
Oh, gosh. I'm just smiling so big over here for so many reasons. First and foremost, I'm 5 years old. I'm eating Frosted Flakes with my dad. That memory has not come back for a long time. Whole body is beaming because I love you so dearly, and I always have. And we've shared so many special, simple moments. And I just love that you brought in that playful metaphor, one of your greatest strengths, metaphors. And I'm so glad that you brought in Most Likely to Succeed and hope. That's where we're going next. You're already on it, of course. The podcast host always knows. So, hey everyone, we've been hearing from my dad, Josh Reppun, the executive director of What School Could Be and the founder of this podcast. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Greg Bear, along with Ryan Rudzeski, and we're the co-hosts of the Remaking Tomorrow podcast,
a series of conversations about the future of learning.
We encourage you to find and listen to the Remaking Tomorrow podcast wherever you listen to your pods.
You'll find over 60 past episodes that you can browse and listen to whenever you'd like.
Remaking Tomorrow is powered by Remake Learning. Learn more at remakelearning.org.
Hey there. Are you interested in hearing weekly conversations with authors, leaders, and practitioners at the forefront of learning and education innovation? Then you'll love the Getting Smart podcast. This podcast amplifies the incredible work being done by some of the most innovative minds in education. Learn new leadership styles, new technologies, new frameworks and mindsets, and get the fuel you need to stay motivated and curious. Together, we can empower all learners to thrive. It's available at gettingsmart.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey everyone, we're back with my dad, Josh Reppun, talking story for the special 150th anniversary episode of the podcast. So Pop, shifting gears, but going where you were starting to go before, digging in, I want to give our listeners a chance to hear a more in-depth take on your journey with the documentary film Most Likely to Succeed. Since the inception of this podcast back in 2019, in many of your episodes, you reference the film's catalytic impact on your life. In your 100th episode with Ted Dintersmith, the executive producer of the film and your friend, colleague, collaborator, and patron, you said, in reference to the film, and I quote, "In 90 minutes, it changed the arc of my life." Tell us more about the life-changing nature of that moment for you in as much focused and specific detail as you are willing to share.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Emma, for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. I will try to be brief and concise on this. In fact, the first time I saw the film, it was a chance encounter. Some friends here in Hawaii had recommended that I see it. We actually got together in someone's apartment and we watched the film. I think in that moment, I knew that it was going to be catalytic in terms of the arc of my life, but that wasn't the moment where I really knew that it was going to be catalytic, or I had started to feel that it was being catalytic in my life. And, just by way of context, I had taught for almost 20 years in 3 different independent schools here in Hawaii. I taught history and economics and Hawaiian studies and every other sort of social studies type course. But I'd left teaching and I was at that point just beginning a 10-year career selling products at the Apple Store, the Ala Moana Apple Store, which is our flagship store here in Honolulu, which was great, by the way. I loved those 10 years. I learned a great deal about what it means to build quick relationships with people that are really meaningful. So I saw the film right at the very beginning. And again, this was October of 2015. That was important, but what happened after that is sort of a slow building and then an acceleration of what the film was going to mean to me. So with those same friends, we actually did a screening of the film, and it was great, and we did a panel afterwards, and that was okay. And I felt a little bit in that moment like the panel had kind of sucked the air out of the room. And just like a traditional classroom, it was a bunch of sort of so-called experts up front who were talking, and everybody in the audience was listening, and it felt weird to me in that moment, in that kind of sage on the stage kind of way. And I wasn't in the panel. I was just in the back watching this whole design unfold. So I vowed in that moment to screen the film again. And I reached out to my beloved brother John. Brother John, if you're listening, dude, that was one of the most important moments of my whole life when I reached out to you and he was like, sure, let's screen the film together. And he was the executive director of something called Key Project, which is a ecumenical youth and senior community center on the Windward Side where I grew up. And it's got a beautiful auditorium hall. And so together, long story short, John and I constructed this screening that ultimately resulted in about 175 people attending from all over the Windward Side and even the rest of Oahu. And even that alone, 175 people coming to a screening is not a small number of people. And so John took care of all of the logistics at Key Project, the sound. We actually got a small grant from a local foundation, made it possible for us to feed everybody who came stew and rice, which is a total Hawaii thing, having stew and rice. And so I designed the actual screening part of it. And I think in just briefly sharing what happened that night, it will explain why the film changed the arc of my life. So 175 people. I was just working from instinct and from the way that I was becoming as a teacher. At that point, I was teaching. I had finished teaching, but the most formative part was La Pietra Hawaii School for Girls. So I did it seminar style. So imagine this giant community hall, a great sound system, a good screen, and there were about 25 round tables that seated about 7 to 8 people. So that's the way that we organized everybody. When you checked in for the film, you got randomized. And I can't tell you, I think it was my niece, Jane, who actually figured out how to randomize everybody by picking a number out of a basket. And I went and got all of my friends in education and asked them to be facilitators at all 25 tables. So I got these 25 people. And so we screened the film. Well, everybody ate stew and rice, which was really a great strategy because now their tummies were happy. And then we rolled the film. And then there came that terrifying moment on a Friday evening at about 8 o'clock at night when the film ended. It's 90 minutes long. And I fully expected everybody to get up and leave. And I was terrified. It's like, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to end up with 5 people in the room and we'll have a little discussion. What ended up happening is no one left the room. Not a single person left. There was applause. And then I asked everybody to go quiet. I had Post-it notes on every table. I asked them to list the 5 most important questions the film had generated for them. And the table facilitators were there. And I instructed everybody to think of themselves as both a facilitator and a participant. And the facilitators acted as both. And then we started the discussion, and the place blew up. You could barely hear yourself think. The noise was so loud. And after about 45 minutes of discussion, and at this point it was getting late on a Friday night, and most people had driven a long ways to get there, I was like, okay, the evening is over. And I got on the mic and I said, okay. And people like literally waved me off. They told me to go away. They were like, we have a lot more to discuss here. So I got shut down. And so it went on for another half an hour after that. And it was incredible. And then there was sort of a spontaneous table sharing that happened. And the really beautiful moment in that table sharing is that there were 3 young kids who were seated at the tables with their families. And they got up and got on the mic and they shared their thoughts about the film. And one of them really kind of poked all 175 people in the room in the eye by saying, you guys you adults need to wake up and start listening to us and what we care about in our education. It was an electric moment. So all of that to say that was the moment that changed the arc of my life, because I realized how powerful that moment was. And I think what happened in the aftermath is the long journey to hope for me. It was the long journey of intentionality. It was the long journey of committed. And in that moment, I really committed myself to the process, not to the film. The film is just a vehicle, but to the process of actually moving that story forward and having it generate all the conversations that it generated. That was in Hawaii, but it was also happening in thousands of screenings across the U.S. So, here we are 11 years later. I'm the executive director of What School Could Be. You draw a straight line from that moment at Key Project and my incredible brother John and him saying yes. By the way, saying yes is really important. And that together we constructed a moment. When we talk about the power of moments, that was a moment. That was an incredible moment. And I'm grateful. I'm totally grateful for that. So, yeah. That's the story there. And by the way, I did have the presence of mind to get a filmmaker to come and make a film out of that evening. It's 8 minutes long, and it's still one of my favorite films. I did not edit it. I just was a producer of it. And her name is Kelsey Matsu, and she's a brilliant filmmaker. And that 8 minutes captured that evening. And if someday, 30, 40 years from now, my ashes are in a small urn and thrown into Kaneohe Bay, I would like a thumb drive with that film on it in my ashes
Good.
as a way of kind of commemorating how much that moment meant to me.
Wow. Again, I'm just marveling at the magic of this kind of conversation and the way fathers and daughters can read each other's minds and podcast hosts can know exactly what's
Yeah.
coming.
Well, and that was also the beginning, Emma, of you coming into Most Likely to Succeed, because then after that, you were part of that journey all the way through. I mean, even to the point where on one of Ted's 13 visits here to Hawaii, you were my quote unquote chief of staff. And that was like the most beautiful 2 weeks of you running the show while I sat in the passenger seat, like, where are we going next? What's the next place that we're visiting? What's the next innovation that we're going to see, And you've been part of that journey all the way along. And again, hand over my heart, that's just like how lucky we are to be able to do this work together.
My hand is over my heart too, and a bit of a bow to you, dearest Father, who once again, humbly and without the intention of singing your own praises, has exemplified exactly what it is that makes you an absolutely brilliant educator, community member, gatherer of the people, father, because you gave me that opportunity. You were like, hey, want to come be chief of staff? And I was like, oh, okay.
What's that?
And then you did it, and you took me seriously, and you treated me with respect, and you gave me tasks that were, appropriately challenging, frankly, and really interesting and life-giving for me. I mean, I'm just laughing. That's truly a line item on my resume.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'll just say back to my original response, which is like, how are you just constantly reading my mind? So in preparation for this podcast, I watched a YouTube video of you presenting Kahalena'au to a group. I'm not sure who exactly. It's someone filming you, introing the film, and then the film rolls. And I wanted to bring it in somehow. It didn't make it into the questions. You got to cut some things. And so I just love that you're bringing that in once again as another beautiful example of your instinct to layer and to build and to weave. To weave experiences. Ted comes to the island for the first time. He's at the end of his 50-state tour. His wife, Elizabeth, has, graciously supported him in this journey, and they've agreed to have a lovely Hawaii vacation just after they tie a nice, tidy little bow on this 50th state. And little do they know that citizen volunteer Josh Reppun has planned a 6-stop tour around the island chain to see all the wonders going on in Hawaii around education innovation. And I'm smiling. There's so much to say here. And I want to bring us into the second part of this question.
Okay.
So in that same 100th episode with Ted, well, and I should start by saying, are you ready for the hardest question, Pop?
I'm ready.
All right. So in that 100th episode with Ted, at the very beginning, the two of you exchanged joyful words, marveling at how you've gotten to this point. 100 episodes, a near decade of collaboration and efforting together under the banner of MLTS and What School Could Be, working tirelessly for all kids everywhere, and an immeasurable amount of global impact that has come from those efforts. And in response to your wonder-filled question of how did we get here, Ted does not miss a beat in saying in response, quote, I'm sure you couldn't believe we would, but I have to tell you that everybody that knows you could absolutely believe that we'd get to this point. And I have to say, Dad, I couldn't agree more with Ted on this. As an example, over these last 10 years, my go-to emoji reply to your text updates about all things MLTS and What School Could Be has been the spider web and the magic sparkles. In my mind, there is really no better or more accurate way to symbolize the work that you have been doing as a connector and change agent in the world of education. And I'll add that you do it so humbly. In our individualistic Western culture, you seem to exist in a rare mental paradigm of all of us together, working for the collective, always deferring the spotlight to others with the intention of uplifting us all. Atlas with the world on his shoulders in the truest sense. And so, my question to you is this. What is it about you that leads all of us who are blessed to be close, and even those farther away, many if not all of your podcast guests included, to nod our heads emphatically in agreement with Ted on the utterly predictable and natural outcome of you having gotten to this point.
Wow. I'm humbled by the question. Thank you. I'm going to go back to something you referenced at the very beginning of this conversation about failure and about learning from failure, which has become a little bit of a buzz phrase, maybe even borderline cliche, but it's an important concept. And there have been moments in my life where I have failed so spectacularly, and people have been so kind and gracious and helping me get through those moments that were so difficult for me and sent me into some very, very hard places that in the process of pulling myself with the help of other beautiful human beings out of those really tough places that happen and exist when you fail at that level, that if it happens to you once, that's one thing, and maybe you might learn from a moment like that. But it happened several times for me where things I was trying to do or positions that I was put in, it just went so off the rails so badly. And I think what that did was really installed a very deep sense of both humility and gratitude. I'm glad that I am where I am today. I'm grateful for where I am today. I am humbled by the work that's happening right now. When I look around, I look at the 150 guests, Emma. I look at all of the people that you and I and Mel and Ashley and Lynn and JT and Kim and Ted, everybody on the team, Robert, Evan, all of us, all the work that we're doing right now as we continue to uncover gemstone after gemstone after gemstone. How could that not leave you with a sense of humility? How could that not? And when you tap in the failure part and the fact that you can look back and go, wow, I actually survived that. And I learned from that. And I became a little bit more determined. And I gained some grit, real grit, authentic grit, not the kind of grit that you get when you grit your way through a stupid multiple choice test. The kind of grit that comes when you pass through a difficult moment, through a wormhole from one side of your life to another side of your life. And that's really where it comes from. And I feel inadequate in this moment to really explain what that means. But yet there it is. There it is. And I would also add in this moment my gratitude to Ted Dintersmith, because all along the way, he just kept saying, it was funny. It's like in that film, The Learning Walk, every other word from Ted was, wow, wow, wow. As we went from island to island, from school to school, he's like, wow. And he's been kind of saying that all the way along. And I guess I've taken that almost like a bowl of, Frosted Flakes. It just feels good to know that he knows that I'm committed and that I'm determined, and that is a quality and a value that all of us at What School Could Be are it's all part of our DNA. And we have these moments where things don't work, and then we pick ourselves up and we keep right on going and we learn. And I don't know, humility is really cool. Humility is really cool. It's like, I'm not ashamed, and I'm not being kind of hoity-toity and saying, oh, I'm humbled in the moment. I am humbled in the moment. There are people out there who are just like working their butts off across the country in the education space and the education adjacent space to make it possible for kids to experience what joy and learning is all about. And good on you, good on all of you. And together we're all doing it humbly. Look at teachers. They are the ultimate humble people. And so just shout out to humbleness, and shout out to all the people out there who are doing the determined and gritty work of making it possible for kids to experience joy. And I'm just grateful for that, for all of these opportunities, which Ted has pretty much underwritten all the way through, and I mean, it's his fault. He's the one who made most likely to succeed. And that's what changed the arc of my life. So there you go.
I'd love to add a shout out, if I would, to all the beautiful things you just named, which are so true about you. And I want to add resilience.
Mm,
There's a piece of art that you so lovingly framed and put in your office that I made for you once upon a time. And
yeah.
it involves a candle, and the flame from the candle is becoming a phoenix.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, as your daughter, I amplify and uplift and celebrate everything you just named and hold it as true. And I'll add resilience and a phoenix like nature.
Mm,
Yeah, thank you for answering that question. It's a big
thank you.
one, and I commend you for finding words to speak to that question of what is it about you? I think it's one of those things in life these days that, to your point, there's sort of this self-deprecating nature or, ego, the whole
Mm,
spectrum there, and the pendulum swings. And how I think one of your greatest strengths, again, a through line with everything you just named, and something that kind of encapsulates it, is your ability to transform challenging experiences and life situations, challenging to say the least, into a softening.
mm,
Not a
mm.
person who's become hard or withdrawn or angry or resentful. You're a person who has softened into your life's greatest struggles, and you're able to speak to it with such honesty. And I just love that about you.
Thank you.
So, circling back once again to your episode with Parul, you say in the interview, and I quote, "I find myself here at age 66 hugely optimistic about a lot of things, including the future of education in America and the world." And you asked Parul to speak on the subject of hope, which you have mentioned here several times in this episode already,
Hmm.
to give us some evidence of why we ought to remain hopeful in these rather dark and ominous times in human history. I love that question, and I'm curious what evidence you would give from your life and current position in the world that might give our listeners a reason to hope today. And taking into consideration all the amazing things you've already spoken to around hope, I would say if there's something specific, even one thing that just comes to mind that you can offer
Mm,
from your personal perspective in this world today that gives you hope, I would love to hear that.
wow. Wow, what a great question. So, how do I approach this? I think I'm going to go back to a guy named Bill Summers. Bill Summers at Canyon City High School. He's the principal there. And Mel Ching and I met with him about 10 days ago. And there was one moment in that conversation, we're working on an initiative called Spotlight On, and we're developing these web pages that come down from Spotlight On at whatschoolcouldbe.org. And one of those pages is a Colorado page. And so we were talking to Bill because we were connected to him by a guy named Scott McLeod. Shout out to Scott McLeod. That guy's an encyclopedia of hope in America about what school could be. And so we have this conversation with Bill. And in the middle of that conversation, as he was describing his role, he said that he had been a classroom teacher for a very long time, and then he got demoted to being a principal. And Mel and I just burst out laughing on that call, which was really funny because, it was like a formal call with the principal. And just the thought of him thinking of himself as being demoted to being a principal was just really funny. But really what was underneath all of that, and this is my way of answering your question, is that Bill's humility in that moment was striking, that he thought of himself as merely the person who is enabling his faculty, his teacher leaders, to do the spectacular things that are happening at Canyon City High School and in the Canyon City schools in rural Colorado. And we're talking about multiple choices for kids like you can't even believe. And the fact that he sees himself as that kind of humble servant to his faculty to make it possible for kids to feel joy in their learning and in their experiences, and the makahana kaike and doing one learns, whether it's a river project where the kids are actually working with scientists to evaluate an entire river ecosystem to figure out its health and what they can do to make it healthier. Just one example of what's happening at Canyon City. Now we're really talking about that 100% by yesterday concept. And so the answer to your question is right now, at an accelerating speed, the What School Could Be team is encountering gemstones like Bill Summers and his teacher leader faculty like every week, every day we're uncovering these. Gone Boarding, Bill Curtis, kids who are shaping surfboards and snowboards and skateboards and are running a business. And this all began in Michigan, but now he's in 7 states. Does that make sense? It's like this is the thing right now. This is what hope is all about. And if you just take a week, listeners, take a week and stop reading the New York Times and the Washington Post and any other news source that you're reading right now, because the only story that you're getting from them is about test scores or about disengagement or about kids who are dropping out of school and all of that. That's not the story. That is not the story. The story that's emerging in America and around the world is that there are tens of thousands of Bill Summers out there. Amazing people like Rebecca Parks, principal in the Kearney schools in southern Missouri, who are doing spectacular work to bring joy to learning for kids. That's the story. So that's what School Could Be is committed to, what I'm committed to, what the team is committed to, is changing the narrative so that the American public can start to realize that there's reason for hope. There is a lot of reason for hope.
Mhm. And it's so true, the Frosted Flakes effect. I have had the incredible privilege, I'll just add here, of being on this team for the last 6 or so months and witnessing you and Mel, for example, day after day, week after week, coming into meetings kind of with shock on your face and a mix of shock and delight. And, there's often a moment where at the beginning of a meeting, you two share about a meeting that you were just in and sort of laugh together in disbelief. And so often I think we find ourselves like, what?
Yeah.
How did that even, what? And I'm just realizing in this moment, I hadn't put conscious thought to it before. I've certainly been in a very happy place for the last 6 months. But in this moment right here, right now with you, I'm realizing that hope effect where you're consuming it, if you will, more often, and then it feels more real, and then there's more of it, and it's amplified. I'm sure there's a lot of really beautiful metaphors about, spider webs and fractalizations and spirals that we could refer to here. Like, this is how human beings work. This is how life works when we amplify out that energy of hope and we scoop more people into it with us, and then they feel more hopeful, and then they find themselves, magnetized to more hope and more uplifting stories, and we create this effect that ripples out. And gosh, it's just such an honor and to sit here with you right now and hear you name those names. And there's so many more names, so many more places where this beautiful work is happening. It's just such a delight to be a part of it with you.
And if I could just add, Emma, that I'm actually reading a very short book right now, highly recommend. It's by the former dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And the title of the book is, Wait, What? And I love that. I want that on my headstone, although I'm not going to get buried. I want it on the urn that has the thumb drive in it with the learning walk on it.
Life directives have come up through this episode.
Yes, absolutely. It's like, wait, what? That is the greatest question of all. Wait, what? That's what we've been doing lately. It's like, it's as if you're watching, the fireworks show that happens off the Hilton Hawaiian Village in Waikiki on Friday nights. And you see the final crescendo of fireworks and you're like, okay, well, it's over. And then all of a sudden, ba-boom, something else happens. And you're like, wait, what? And that's the joy. That's the joy in doing this work. And that's why I'm just so grateful to all of the people who've listened to this podcast over the 5 years. It continues to astonish me that many people do. But that's because they feel the energy from these educators. These educators all across the country and the world put fuel in the tanks of our listeners. I'm convinced of it. And it's all about this like, wait, what? So I love that.
Love that. Okay, winding us down here. Though my list of wonders for you is infinitely long and I could go on for hours, truly. Another two-part hypothetical
Okay.
and iteration of your hallmark final question to guests, inspired by Roman Krznarik's highly influential book, The Good Ancestor. Let us now draw up a chair, or rather, two chairs, here in our virtual circle. First, for your theoretical grandchild, one of the many future ones who is yet to come. And the second, for someone on whose shoulders you stand, an ancestor, if you will, who dreamed us into being, whose labors and acts of love and goodwill laid the foundation for us to be here now, thriving and planting seeds of our own in the hopes that they will too grow. In the spirit of seeds and of giving thanks, I want to give you a chance to address both these imaginary beings for which we are making intentional space to join us here today. So, starting with a theoretical grandbaby, perhaps a granddaughter, I would love for you to describe the kind of childhood you would wish for her. Imagining her journey as a human, an innately curious being that is always learning. What specifically would you want for her formative K to 12 years? I'm sure the list is long, but perhaps just a few specific core elements that our listeners can make note of.
Wow. Wow. What a beautiful way to kind of tie it up at the end. All right. To this future grandchild. So here's what I would want. I'm going to return us to Southern Missouri, to Rebecca Parks, to the LENS program, LENS. It's an acronym, to the Kearney Public Schools, and at least at the elementary level. I would want this future grandchild to go through one of the most remarkable things that I ever heard on a podcast. So Rebecca Parks is a principal. She partners through a connection made by an incredible human being, Bill Nicely, at the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. She partners, and he was her superintendent at that time. She partners with an artist who specialized in a sort of ceramic and or other type of material process of making fossils, if you will, of long extinct creatures, dinosaurs, fish, I don't know, you name it, all kinds of really interesting critters that existed, tens of thousands, even millions of years ago. And he makes these replications using these materials. And generally, they kind of end up in a gallery somewhere and, people buy them and all of that. But he ends up partnering with Rebecca. And here's the part that really gets me. This is like I'm speaking to my future grandchild here. So imagine a snowy day. It's cold. The yard of the school by this artist has been dug up. And under all of the dirt has been removed. And then all of these critters, these fossils made out of, whatever material, ceramic, plastic, whatever, silicon, they're all laid down on the ground. And then the dirt is put back over the top. And the program LENS begins. And this is the kids coming out, coached, guided, mentored, advised, sponsored by their teachers. And the kids come out and they get to go through a whole morning in the snow, it's cold, doing an archaeological dig. And as they dig down, they don't know what's underneath the dirt. They're digging, they just know, like, we're learning how to remove dirt to find out what's underneath. And then all of a sudden, there's one of those critters. And imagine that kid just like yelling in surprise and delight. It's like, and you know what that question is going to be, right? Well, first of all, it's going to be, wait, what? And then it's going to be, what is this? That is inquiry. And then the morning continues in the snow, where most kids would be back inside a classroom somewhere or whatever. These kids are out there and they're digging it up and they're learning what these critters are. This is what learning is all about. And I really have to emphasize the partnership between Rebecca and this artist that really made this happen. And the best part about it is this program, the LENS program, ended up spreading throughout the district. And it actually closed down because it wasn't necessary anymore, because the lens concept had been embedded across the district at elementary level. So could that be extended up through middle school and into high school? You bet. Absolutely. Hell yes. It could be extended. And I could give you, if we had another hour, 20 examples of how that's happened. Let's take the Sammy School and the Tacoma Public Schools as a shining example. Shout out to Adam Koulis up there, who's doing remarkable work. And so what I would want, Emma, is that someday that when the grandchild, your child, my grandchild, has grown up, they look back and go, Grandpa was part of promoting this idea, and it's spread all across the country. And wow, that's pretty cool. That would make me feel really good.
Maybe so. Wow, I'm just taking that in. That's, yeah. I'm just having a moment here. And
It's that moment, right? When I talk about it in the episodes, you want to go back to school. You want to go back to school. I know you do.
I know.
Yes.
There's that part of me. And in this moment, it's hitting me that my child, my future theoretical child that we hope will come, will have such a loving relationship with her grandfather. Yeah, and we honor our elders and we speak respectfully of our elders. And to my grandfather, Ducky, who I didn't have a lot of time on earth with, there's a lot to be said there, but respectfully. But I want to amplify that you are the kind of person who has made such a beautiful life that you could gift a relationship like that to a grandchild. And that's so special. Yeah. Turning our attention to that other chair, that cherished elder, ancestor, wise one who came before, on whose shoulders you stand, the invitation being for you to name them and to offer up your gratitude for the ways they have lifted you up and given you the life you now lead.
Absolutely. I'm going to name Paul Doc Berry. We all knew him as Doc. Doc was my English teacher when I was a senior at Punahou School. I graduated in 1976. Doc passed away about 10 years ago. He was the very first teacher, again, large independent school. Picture Josh mostly sleepwalking through the death march of chemistry, biology, history, math, whatever. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. It didn't feel relevant to me. Most of my learning happened on Kaneohe Bay and in rural Kahaluu, where I grew up. That's, the outdoors was where, that was my real classroom. But then there was Doc Berry. So Doc taught English. It was a class called Fiction and Film. And the idea is that we'd read these works of fiction that had been written up as films, or their screenplays had been developed and they had become films. And there was some kind of magic in just that concept. So I was kind of engaged. This was an elective. So I was engaged kind of from the beginning. But my shout out to Doc is because brilliantly, he was the only teacher that I ever had in high school who did project-based learning. So in a more traditional sense, the project came at the end of the year, but I got started with it really early. And basically, he wanted everybody to make a film. And this was back in the Super 8 days. So where a lot of the kids ended up, making films of each other skateboarding down mountains up above Honolulu, Josh came in with a 17-minute rendition, of recreation of James Thurber's wonderful fable called A Unicorn in the Garden. And it turned into a full-blown production. I got all my brothers involved. They were farmers. I got their Jeep. I got their horse that became the unicorn. We strapped the unicorn on its forehead. I filmed the thing in Super 8. My brother David did all the graphics for it. And all along the way, Doc Berry was advising and coaching and mentoring me. And then came that magic moment where we got to present our films in class. And I actually went out and found a honky-tonk piano player to actually play the score to the film live in class. And Doc had seen a lot of things, but that one blew him away. And I just look back and say, that was my moment. That was the moment where I experienced pure joy in learning in this thing that we called school. And Doc remained, because circling back to the very beginning, Emma, he met me where I was at. He understood that I had creativity and imagination inside me. He gave me the opportunity to unleash that creativity and imagination, to direct a project, which is a crucial 21st century skill, even though it wasn't the 21st century yet. And in the end, Doc, because he knew me so well, became my lifelong friend and mentor and guide and coach. He was the funniest human being on earth. We used to have coffee together for hours where I would literally walk away with my ribs hurting because I'd been laughing so hard with him. And, 100% by yesterday, I want every kid in this thing that we call school, in whatever shape or form, public, private, or charter, I want every kid to have an opportunity to have someone like Doc in their life, a teacher, a coach, a guide, a beautiful human being, a funny human being, somebody who really cared about people. So, Doc, if you're looking down and listening to this thing, and I know you are, thank you, sir. You meant everything to me. You gave me a definition of what it means to be a good ancestor. And I will never forget it. And I live my life by it, Doc. And I really appreciate that. So I thank you, Emma, for giving me the opportunity to talk about Doc.
Wow, beautiful. And let us dedicate this episode to all those who choose to be like Doc, who are the protective factors for all kiddos out there who step up, who see an opportunity to support and nurture and care for a young one. Let's dedicate this episode to them, and may they receive the nourishment and the resourcing and the fuel in their tanks to keep going, because we need them. We all need them.
Yep. And that's what school is all about. We're trying to do everything we can to put fuel in people's tanks by uplifting them and spotlighting them and highlighting their stories. And we're just going to keep going. We've got a lot of work ahead of us.
So true. It's been such an honor to talk with you, Pop. And I don't want it to end, but we'll leave it here for now. And yeah, I wonder if there's any last Hawaiian words that make sense here now.
Yeah, there is. I mean, even the concept of aloha, that it's so all-encompassing. It's a way of being. It's a way of expressing yourself. And so from my perch here in this little studio in Kalani Valley in East Honolulu, my greatest possible aloha to all the educators out there who are doing the incredible work of trying to figure out what school could be and to bring joy to learning. Wow. Mahalo, meaning thank you. Aloha to all of you. And thank you, Emma, for giving me this opportunity to yak a little bit to our listeners today for the 150th. It has been fun.
Oh, I love you so much, Pop.
I love you too.
Our editor, creative consultant, and sound engineer is the talented Evan Kurohara. Our theme music is created by a remarkable pianist, Michael Sloan. Producer of 12 albums with over 100 songs, Michael Sloan is featured in Apple Music, Spotify, and all major music platforms. You can also find his work on his YouTube channel. Michael has listeners in over 100 countries and 2,000 cities. We'd be grateful if you would support these episodes with leading edge, innovative and imaginative educators and students by giving us your own rating and writing a review wherever you get your podcasts. This series is sponsored by Education Change Agent, Ted Dintersmith, executive producer of the award-winning documentary film, Most Likely to Succeed, and author of the best-selling book, What School Could Be. If you are committed to rolling up your sleeves and joining thousands of educators, business professionals, nonprofit leaders, and parents as we reimagine education to be relevant and learner-centered, please join the What School Could Be global online community. Simply log in to community.whatschoolcouldbe.org or download the What School Could Be app from your favorite app store. The What School Could Be podcast is brought to you by Josh Reppun Productions. Send your feedback to josh@whatschoolcouldbe.org. Follow the show on Twitter @WSCB Podcast and on LinkedIn @Josh Reppun. Listeners, one of the most important things we all can do is to bring kindness and compassion into the world. For sure, we need a surplus of both right now. Until next time, ahui ho, and thank you for listening to the What School Could Be podcast.